Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. Back by popular demand for the third time in the hot seat. Today we're going to have a special guest, Andy Veering, Director of Appraisals at Taylor & Martin, is going to be with us and breaking down all kinds of things. Andy, welcome to the hot seat.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be back, Spencer.
Well, we missed you. We missed you, and there's been a lot that has changed and evolved since our last meeting. So a lot to catch up on. But for those that have not seen our other episodes, would you take just kind of 20 seconds and give us a little context for what you do with your team there at Taylor & Martin?
Yeah, so we do valuations for a lot of banks, a lot of companies working with lending purposes or acquisitions, and then we run auctions every week across the country. So we keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on week to week, and we'd like to pay attention to what we're seeing now and what we're seeing in the future.
Well, we knew you could take the heat in 22 and in 23. Let's see if you can take the heat in 24. So with that, let's jump right in. So provide a little backdrop here in terms of the history of the used truck market starting in 22. Give us a little, where were we then and where are we now?
Yeah, so the pandemic caused mayhem all across the industry. Predominantly, it was to do with the supply chain. Therefore, we were not making the amount of trucks we're making now or typically do in the past. So demand was extremely high for any used equipment. Since then, we've kind of figured out the supply chain, the money that was given out to people across America that had the extra spending money for products and goods that were shipped with the trucking industry is kind of by the wayside. We're back to kind of normal production, normal consumer usage. But we have some excess trucks at the moment. So what we're seeing is we're kind of bumping along the bottom of the market. We're kind of waiting for that one thing that's going to kick us over the edge and get us back into a profitable market.
So at the peak of 2022, to what degree did used equipment valuations increase as a percent of where they would typically be?
If we had late model stuff, since the new was the what was not getting produced, late model equipment, even at our auctions, was bringing almost double what it was worth. A lot of cases, it was bringing $20,000, $30,000 more than what a new piece of equipment was. It's just if you ordered new equipment, it might be 6 months or 12 months before you get it. So if it was on the market today, people were paying through the roof to get that equipment in their fleet. It was
That's
crazy.
incredible.
It was insane.
Very, very interesting times. And so here we are, 2024, and there's a lot of folks, we're kind of on hopefully the tail end of one of the longest freight recessions on record. What are you hearing? How are people thinking about equipment um, and getting on the other side of this recession?
Right. So there's a couple things going on that's interesting. We're starting to see in the matrix I look at to just to get a feel for what's coming, what's going to come at auction next. We're starting to see some signs of some positivity. Inventory levels that are out on listings that are out on truck paper, for example, and some of those sites, those are actually reducing currently. Generally, when we see that, that's a sign that used truck prices are going to start to increase. But then you throw on top of that that we're in an election year, and people still aren't spending the money they were a couple years ago. So we're seeing some positive signs, but unfortunately, I think it's going to be more of it's going to be delayed before we start seeing anything good. So potentially in 2025. But I think we've seen the bottom. I think we are done dropping with the used truck values.
Well, that's encouraging. So let's unpack the election a little bit. Why is that significant? What needs to be hashed out through this election so people can feel comfortable about making purchases in this freight market?
Well, it's interesting because we have such a divide in politics right now. The if Harris or if it's Trump, there's two totally different philosophies, especially for the trucking world, whether it's electrification or if we're talking about tariffs. I mean, they both are just have a very big divide in what they're at least saying their policies are going to be. And I think that's going to increase the hesitation on people on their bigger, larger purchases, which generally slows down the trucking industry.
Interesting. Interesting. Let me back up. You do some work as part of supportive acquisitions. Can you
Mhm.
provide a little bit more, expand on that a little bit? What's the significance of having the appraisals on the equipment? What role does it play within the
Yeah.
acquisition process?
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll go in and value a company, value their assets for the acquisition process. But we've been in this down market for a while, so we've been seeing more and more bankruptcies where companies are really struggling and they're thinking about shutting doors. But we've noticed an uptick in conversations with these people that they kind of look for maybe to get acquired where it's not a bad thing to work with your competition because in the end, all your employees are still going to have jobs and it might be a better way as opposed to just shutting doors. So, in the process of us putting values on things, we kind of talk to them about what's your end goal, what do you want to do? And in the end, majority of the time they're fighting for their employees. So it's turning a lot of these bankruptcies into smaller ones to where they're actually reaching out and working with other companies to let that company grow, but their employee base and their customer base still gets the same service it had before.
So we've got the election, we've got the freight recession, and hopefully the winding down of that freight recession. What are some of the other influencers as you've been doing this a long time, as it relates to just appraising used trucks? What are some of the other factors that have influence on the values of business owners' fleets?
Yeah. Obviously, it's going to be your contract and your spot rates. That's directly correlated with consumer usage. So we keep an eye on the ports. The ports have started picking up more. More and more equipment has been coming into the United States. More and more consumer goods. Let me rephrase. And a lot of times we're getting set up for that holiday rush. So if consumers continue to spend decent money and don't get too tight with their pocketbooks, that's good for the trucking industry. I think the lowered interest rates could also spark some more usage in the housing markets and the bigger spends where they're going to need the supplies to grow. So the need for trucking is there, and that'll drive up those rates.
No, no argument there, sir. So, what advice would you give to folks as they're thinking about, um, replacing their fleet and upgrading? What advice coming into 2025 do you have to help owners think about making smart investments in their fleet?
Um, I think if you're going to grow now is the time. We are looking at a big emissions change in 2027. So we are still expecting to have a pretty large pre-buy second half of 2025 and into 2026 just to avoid those first round of emissions. So to not get caught up in that headache, I think it would be smart to at least start the process now. If you can hold on to some of your older equipment, I think that's going to be a positive as well because pre-emission trucks generally, when something like this happens, do hold their value a little bit better until that new technology is proven. So if that's something that you can put into your game plan, I think that's a very smart thing to do.
What are the risks associated with making some missteps as part of that same issue?
Yeah. Well, in 2021, when the market was through the roof spot rates, you couldn't not make money. A lot of people made the risk of buying too much equipment at those elevated costs, and then when your rates come back down, you're still stuck with that very high cost equipment, and getting out of them or replacing them just financially never really made sense. It was more of a forced. And so you really want to pay attention to make sure you have your fleet the way you want it to look for now and then the next 2 or 3 years.
I'm curious, there was a period over about 12 months where we saw, I think it was 11 interest rate hikes. And it was, the fastest um, interest rate hike in history on record. And so during that period and since then, what has been the effect on overall value with the cost of capital increasing so much?
Yeah, well, all prices went up. obviously. And now they're talking with this 2027, they're talking that it might be another $20,000 cost to new truck costs just in the M&A that was done for the new technology. So you throw that on top of that, if the interest rates don't come back down, that's going to be very difficult on the mid-range to small trucking companies that are looking to upgrade their fleet and stay with the emission rulings.
To what degree, based on a lot of fleet owners and fleet managers, are they considering that as part of when they're doing projections for 2025 and 2026? Are they considering that as part of their ongoing business performance?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you remember '08 and '09 after the 2007 emissions change, it was tough. That first round of those engines just it struggled. They were getting overhauled at 300,000 miles. And, that's when a truck's off the road and you're spending another 20 grand. So I think there's going to be some cautious people out there. You're going to adapt with it. You're going to let the bigger companies that can afford a little bit more risk run them for a couple of years and kind of see how they perform before you jump in with both feet.
Mhm,
I think you're going to see a little bit more of the pre-buy on those guys, and they'll invest slowly with the new technology,
mhm.
just so you
So when
don't
we
get
have
caught.
these, very public bankruptcies, as we've had multiple over the last year, what is the impact, both short term and long term, of the used truck market when you have thousands of used trucks flood the market at a singular time?
Right.
What happens in that situation?
Yeah, a lot of times, well, you're going to saturate the market. I know yellow's been a big one that's been discussed. Um, they have very specific equipment. So overall in the trucking industry, it didn't affect it as bad as a lot of people thought. But they had a lot of the 28-foot trailers, the single axle trucks, where there's a very limited pool of buyers for that, regardless whether there's a bunch of them or a small amount. But yeah, you get into there and start throwing, 2 or 3 thousand 53-foot trailers, and the same with late model trucks. I mean, that's where it gets difficult. It's just nice when you have those that are segmented out where, you're not going to fill a specific pool. It's going to be a lot of different groups that can use that equipment.
Interesting. Sir, you never disappoint. You're always full of excellent knowledge, and I know that our network and our audience really appreciates it. So I do have one last question for you, a little wild card.
Okay.
Many of our audience, they know that you've got a little bit of a Husker background and played a little football back in the day. So my question is, do the Huskers, yeah, true or false? Huskers get 10 wins this season.
I'm going to say false. I'm thinking 8 or 9. I'm trying not to drink the Kool-Aid. You know how that goes. I want to see it. I'm just going to try and hold back. I think we're at 8 or 9 wins this year, which would be great.
Well, I think you just got some new clients based on your trustworthiness and credibility
I'm being honest. I'm
because
trying
of
to be
that
honest.
answer. But
Yeah,
I think we're all glad that we're back and football's back, and the world will be right soon. So,
yeah, absolutely.
hey, Andy, thank you so much for all you do for our industry. Thanks for spending some time with us here in the hot seat. That's going to do it for us here. We will see you next time.